Hi, my name is Brian J. Walker, and I'm here with Dick Bauerle. This is part of the Music of Kenton series. Dick, you're a resident, or grew up as a resident of Kenmore.
My entire life.
How did the Bauerle family get to Kenmore?
That's a really good question because I don't know. All I know is my grandparents moved from the Fruit Belt in Buffalo to Colonial Avenue, which is right up the street. Now that's where my dad grew up. Mm-hmm. And then when he got back from Korea, like a lot of soldiers, we actually lived in the Sheridan Projects for about 3 years, and then we moved to Colonial right across from my grandparents. So that's kind of how I got to Kenmore.
I know there are other people in your family, so tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, there's my mom and my dad. My dad, unfortunately, now deceased. I have a brother, Tom, who some people may know from the radio.
We've heard of him,
yeah. I've heard of him. I also have a sister, Barb, and then I had another brother, Billy, who sadly passed away in 2019.
And where do you fit in the order here?
I am the oldest.
You were the experimental child where they figured that they were going to turn you into a civilized human being, and then the other ones they kind of gave up on a little bit more as they went on.
Well, history says that there may have been two mistakes, me and Tom. He was the youngest and I was the oldest. I don't know if I can say that on this, but you asked and I'm telling you the truth.
And so you went to school in Kenton system?
All of it. When we lived in the Proj, I went to Sheridan Parkside for first and second grade. And then I went from second grade to sixth in this very building here at what was Philip Sheridan School back in the day. And then went to Hoover for a year and 10 weeks, Ben Franklin after that, and graduated from Kenmore East in 1970.
And where'd you go after that?
I went to UB.
Okay. Along the way, somewhere along the way here, music must have entered into this situation. Was it, when you were, in kindergarten and they brought out the little blocks and the sticks and they started, you were singing folk songs?
Well, you're not too far off. I think it was in either first or second grade, maybe third, probably third grade. They were having auditions to actually officially learn how to play those little box and bells. So I had to go down and audition to see if I qualified to learn how to play an instrument such as those were, and I failed the audition. And the music teacher at the time, it was Mr. Broody, and this is a funny story. Mr. Broody, I begged him, I said, look, I don't know what I did wrong, but I really want to play an instrument. He says, I'm sorry, you have no musical aptitude whatsoever. And the ironic part is, when I was inducted into the Kenmore East Performing Arts Hall of Fame, he got inducted the same night. So history has a funny way of being somewhat cyclical.
So somehow you managed to get involved in musical instruments. Any musicians in the family? Any musical background in the family?
Yeah, my mom played violin and my uncle played French horn. But I always, even when I was a young kid, I always had an affinity for music. Like we'd be taking rides with my parents. And this is before the Beatles. This is like the late 50s. And I would hear certain songs on the radio that for some reason would strike a chord with me. Something inside that I really can't express. Yeah. So there was always that like DNA of music that was somewhere in me. And I always wanted to play guitar, even before the Beatles. And I remember a kid across the street had a guitar that his parents bought him. And I would just go over there and look at it, and I was just mesmerized. Obviously never picked it up, couldn't do anything. But then when the Beatles hit, it was all over. Everybody in the neighborhood was trying to form some kind of garage band. None of us could play, of course, but we tried anyways. So that was my first experience was, it would be 1964, dabbling, getting my first guitar, struggling learning how to play it, and then keeping at it. And then eventually, over the years, it kind of clicked in by the time I was in 9th grade. Things were starting to kind of form. Whatever my style allegedly is, that was starting to happen then.
So what was the first guitar?
First guitar I ever had was one we bought at Sattler's. It was a $20 acoustic guitar with action only about this far off the fretboard.
Hey, if you could play that, you could play anything.
Well, I couldn't play that. That was a problem. And then my first electric guitar, my grandparents got me. It was a 4-pickup Kimberly, which I still have in my attic at home.
Cool.
But I took it apart, and somebody needs to put it back together with more knowledge than I'll ever have.
I can't imagine what a luthier will charge you to do that.
Well, I have friends. And there's one friend of mine who actually was a luthier, and he worked as one in Carolina, and he's a former student of mine, and he has volunteered to put that thing back, because I'd like to have it playable, not to use it out, but just more from a personal historical standpoint. It would be fun to restore the very first one.
So you had students? You must have taught.
Well, I did, but many, many, many years later. I had, at one point about 15 or 16 students, in addition to doing my session work and my live gigs. So that was an important part of my income. I would say from 1978-ish, through the I think I stopped maybe around 1988 when I got my record deals because I ran out of time.
So we've gone from getting your first guitar to a record deal. There must be something that happened in between.
Well, actually there was. I formed my first band in 1966 called the Raves. We weren't very good. We had a limited repertoire. Much beyond Gloria or Satisfaction, we were stumped. But about a year after that, in '67, we got suddenly better, where we learned how to sing harmony and the stuff started to sound professional. And then, of course, one of the guys quits, so then that band evolved into something else. Well, ultimately, by the time I was a senior in high school, we formed a band called Hard Times, and that was 7 of us. We all went to Kenmore East. It was a pretty good band, but again, we were neophytes still. We were still learning, our voices were still maturing, our musical abilities were still growing, our knowledge was still growing. But by 1973, that band actually 72, that band got really, really good. We were one of the top bands in Western New York. We had Paul Varga, who went on to fame and fortune in Talis. Paul was in that band. In 1972, we played 313 gigs. The next year, we played 337. And I have everyone listed, and I know how little money we made at every one of them.
You were busy.
We were very busy. And I was going to UB through all that.
Oh, boy.
So, I mean, we're playing 6 nights in a row in Rochester, and you learn how to sleep in the back seat of a car with your head up against the door. And it was, I look back on it now, and I don't know how I ever did it. And I still came out of UB with a 3.5, which is a miracle in and of itself.
Musical influences. Everybody draws from somebody else. Who are your first influences?
My very first influence?
Sure.
Will probably throw you. I had a lot of friends that were also playing guitar contemporaneously with me, and they were all like listening to blues guys and stuff because they were told that's what they had to do. I was always more like a pop type guy. So I would say the first person that really opened my eyes to wanting to be good was Glenn Campbell.
Heck of a player.
I mean, there's throwing you a curve. You didn't expect that.
One of the best players out there. Another session guy. I mean, he played on everything. He didn't just play country by any means.
Yeah, I'd go to my friend's house, and he'd be playing all these really Mike Bloomfield licks from the Paul Butterfield band. We'd be jamming, and his mother would come down and say, "Ronnie, why don't you play like him?" I've always sort of had ADD when it comes to music. I wish I had the discipline to say, okay, I'm going to do just jazz, just country, just rock, but that was never me. I loved all forms of guitar music, and I kind of stole from everybody. A very little bit of Hendrix, a lot of Clapton. My biggest influence that really kick-started my wanting to be really good was Terry Kath from Chicago. He was the guy. And I took lessons from a guy named Joe Francavilla to hopefully crack that veil for me. And at one point, Chicago 2, one of my favorite albums of all time, yep. I could play every one of those solos note for note. But what really helped my chops was playing 6 and 7 nights a week.
You don't even have to worry about practicing when you're playing 6 or 7 nights a week.
You absolutely don't. And we were playing so often, when I felt like I was getting stale, I would listen to somebody before a gig. So I would listen to maybe Hendrix one night, Machine Head by Deep Purple the next night, and then when I would play, I would channel some of those concepts into my playing just to try to keep it fresh. And then I morphed into the jazz rock thing. Larry Carlton, Robin Ford, those types of players. So when I graduated from UB, I got hundreds of dollars of music books, and I literally gave myself a course in music theory, jazz. I would record these records, slow it down to half speed, and then learn licks. There was no YouTube.
Having a tape recorder was a big deal back then.
And the other part of it was when you slowed a tape recorder down to half speed, it drops the pitch.
Right.
Before that, when you were working off, let's say, a 45 record, and you slowed it down to 33, it way changed the pitch.
Yes.
And so you had to try to transpose it, but I didn't have enough knowledge in those days to make that process real easy. I remember trying to learn the intro to Valerie by the Monkees that way, and it just didn't work out, No, and I tell you, Brian, if you go on YouTube or if you get, Reels or any of those things that pop up on your Facebook page, playing guitar, it's a marriage between the mental and the physical. It's best to develop the physical part, I think, when you're younger.
Yeah.
When your tendons and muscles are more malleable. My style is already set in stone. I could not play like Yngwie if somebody paid me $50 million to do it. I'm more like that old proverbial, you know, Clapton-esque school. Clapton, Jeff Beck, you know, Hendrix, Terry Kath, I mentioned. Unfortunately for these kids that have all this virtuosity, it's not really music. And you don't remember one note that they play. I would rather listen to a solo by George Harrison, like Something, where every note means something.
I've seen young artists for a long time. The first magic moment is when what you think can come out your fingers or come out your instrument. Then you want to get really good on the instrument, and it becomes technical, you know, how fast can I play, or
Right.
how well can I do this? And then eventually it's like, no, I've got something to say, I need to say it. The best artists are the ones that use those tools in order to create that particular feeling.
Well, you know,
Create that emotion.
Yeah, like you've seen ASP. Sometimes
Yes.
sometimes I get to do.
All-Star Project, by the
Right.
way.
Sorry about that.
That's one of the bands Dick is in right now, is the All-Star Project.
Regardless what jazz licks I know or whatever, if I'm playing a Tom Petty song, I try to channel the Tom Petty song. Now, I might take it a little out in a couple spots, but by and large, I try to stay faithful to the feeling of what the recording is. Even with my own songs, it's like I never wrote a song where it was supposed to be a vehicle for a guitar solo. Melody, chord change, and beat always came first, and then if I put a solo in, well, that had to meet those criteria. A song that reaches somebody, that reaches the masses, has to have a good melody, a good beat, and it has to be identifiable. And when you're playing, you know, 188th notes, it's kind of difficult to achieve that, I believe.
I think that's what the best artists do, is they serve what the song needs, not what they, you know, want to show off with.
No, you're right. I saw Jeff Beck at UB last time that he was here, obviously. He probably only played that whole concert maybe 7 or 8 licks that momentarily were even you'd consider flashy.
Yeah.
Most of his beauty was the tone and the technique and the songs themselves.
Yeah.
Jeff played to the song.
I thought he got better as he got older.
Yes, I agree.
I thought he was playing at his best just before he passed away.
Absolutely. And again, through all of this growth period that we're talking about, I worked at Select Sound Studio, and I was the staff arranger, producer, engineer, you know, really the whole enchilada in the recording arts, and I probably have done 14,000 hours minimum worth of sessions, the good, bad, and the ugly. Gloria Loring, I worked with her. She had that one hit, Friends and Lovers, out. I produced 2 songs on that album and went to New York City, had the chance to work with people like Steve Gadd, the drummer, Paul Schaefer from the David Letterman Show. So it was kind of fun momentarily being in the bigs. And right when that was going on is when I had that song that was put in Spaceballs. I guess that's my legacy for my 16 and a half seconds of fame forever.
That's the thing that actually gets you a check every once in a while for like 19 cents or something?
Yes, but not 19 cents.
Oh, good.
Oh, it's more than 19 cents.
Good. Spaceballs, I mean, that's, you know, become a cult movie.
Well, a quick story behind that. I was a paid songwriter at the time for Jerry Myers and Global.
Okay.
And there were 4 of us on staff, and we had a salary, and our obligation was to write 3 songs a month.
Yeah.
Jerry's breakthrough, you'll remember it, was My Pledge of Love by Joe Jeffrey. That was his major breakthrough. But Jerry was very well connected with all the major labels because he did a great job for them getting their stuff.
Yeah, he was a big promoter.
He was really, really big. Jerry's thing was, you know, I think I'll try to be the Berry Gordy of Buffalo. So he knew some of us could actually write decent songs, so we thought, well, if I put 4 people on staff, the odds of me getting at least 1 or 2 great songs out of these people over a couple months that I can pass along to somebody else and have a hit, because he would own half the publishing. That was his,
right.
You know, which is fine. One of the songs I wrote, and I'll never forget the night I wrote it. I wrote it in like 3 minutes. I thought the Bangles were big at the time, and I thought, wow, what a perfect song for the Bangles. So I had Mark Dixon, I don't know if you know Mark.
Yep.
Mark did the initial demo. The demo went to a bunch of girls I was producing at the time, and they were looking for some additional original material. So I played them Mark's demo, and I said, hey, why don't you guys do this song? What do you think? They liked it, so they worked up their version of it. So meanwhile, I'm thinking like, well, maybe that's the last I'll ever hear of it. But I told Jerry, I said, Jerry, you got to get this to the Bangles. I wrote this song for them. So Jerry's in Europe someplace. I'm sitting at my kitchen table. I get a call from Sheila Makoff, who was Jerry's, right-hand girl. And Sheila and I, she's now deceased, wonderful person. She calls me up and she says, "Are you sitting down?" I go, "No, I'm standing up talking to you on the phone, actually." She goes, "Your song just got put in a Mel Brooks movie." And I'm like, "How did that happen?" Well, Jerry sent all these demos out to his various connections. And one guy, Jerry Goldberg from MGM, was working with Mel Brooks on Spaceballs. And as the story goes, I can't confirm nor deny this because I wasn't there. Apparently, Greenberg was listening to my song. He had a meeting with Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks walked in while my song was playing, says, "What's that?" "I want that for the movie." And it was the last song that was put in the Spaceballs movie. And it's on the jukebox scene. But I'm still mad because it would have been a big hit for the Bangles and I probably would have made more money. But hey, such is life, you know.
Mel Brooks noticed you. That's got to have some gratification there, right?
Well, it does. And plus the fact that people are going to be showing the Spaceballs movie probably forever. Where are the Bangles these days?
Exactly.
So there you go.
So you did okay with that one.
Yeah, other than that, I wish I could have written Sugar Sugar, but that's another story. And I didn't write that one.
So bands in the 70s, recording studio, recording, working in the studio, working as a recording artist, writing songs, finally get on a soundtrack. Then what?
I had a contract with MCA initially, which didn't go as well as we all hoped because the guy that signed me, typical, ended up leaving the company, and the guy that replaced him brought in all of his artists from a label that he owned. Typical story. But it got my music played on Entertainment Tonight every night. They were using it for bump music.
Okay.
So that got me at least a little bit noticed, so that when I recorded some new stuff and Jerry took it to Atlantic Records, they kind of knew who I was. And they liked what I did, and then they signed me. So I was signed to Atlantic Jazz. And my first recording actually hit #5 on most of the smooth jazz radio stations and charts. Things were going great. But then Ahmet Ertegun's brother, Nashawi, passed away, and he was the driving force. They did not know what to do with us. So we ended up, are you ready? We ended up in the rap division.
Okay.
And so that, so at that point, it was like the end of the smooth jazz era.
Right.
So, once that happened, they didn't renew the contract, and, that was basically that. But it was great while it lasted. And like I said, I caught in there on the tail end of that smooth jazz fad, which was about a 5-year thing.
You're among the list of people that almost made it out of Buffalo and hit the big time.
Oh, it was close.
There's an awful lot of people then on that.
Oh, I was close. And when I go online on Facebook, people that I don't even know from all over are still playing my stuff. They'll put together their smooth jazz playlist, and my stuff still shows up on it.
Cool.
So it's I'm gone, but mostly forgotten, but not totally.
Back to the Buffalo scene, working in Joyride. When did Joyride come about?
I joined Joyride in 1996.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was in a band called Topaz, which was the first band, by the way, back in '80. When was that? '75, signed by Lenny Silver.
Okay.
On Luann Records. Luann, I guess, was his daughter's name.
Yeah.
And so that was my first professional recording. It didn't do too bad locally. It was in like every bar in Buffalo on the jukebox. Remember those?
Yes, yeah.
And then from there, I took a hiatus, and that's when I formed my own jazz band. Then I was in a 60s band called Pastime.
Okay.
And then throughout all of that, Emerald City spawned out of Topaz. So there's a big connection with a lot of Buffalo Award winners. And then we reunited, Topaz reunited as Pastime in 1985. And then that lasted all the way up through, in various forms, 90, 96. And I had filled in with Joyride a couple of times, and they were reforming after Jana's had her baby, and they asked me to join. And I thought, yeah, why not? Because they're playing a lot more than I am. And they were getting all the really, really good gigs, too.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great opportunity, and I joined Joyride, and I was in Joyride for 22 years before the pandemic killed it. Thank you, COVID.
Along the way, you played in a few other bands or played in a few other projects.
The All-Star Project is just a pet project of mine that Donnie Tomasulu, Matt Young, and I put together when we all worked at Entercom. And it was supposed to be a one-off gig, and here we are 13 years later, we're still together because it was so much fun and it generally sounds good. And then Scott Salaney, who I also filled in with, asked me to put this band together, an Eagles tribute band, Tequila Sunrise. I always loved the Eagles, so I was in on that. And then I think there's going to be another new band coming. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but let's just say it'll feature music of the 70s.
And along the way, you got into radio sales and got had a day job.
Yeah, well, I had to. After I finally had the realization when the Atlantic contract did not get renewed, it was like, you know what? I'm sick of this. I'm seeing all my friends drive nice cars and get nicer houses, and I've got a college degree, and I'm not that stupid. Maybe I should get maybe I should get a day job. So, long story short, I did a lot, a lot of, really good jobs. Ultimately, I ended up working for my brother-in-law because he needed help. And that went well. And then I realized, I got the radio bug, and I kept hearing those ads, on the radio, like, be an account executive, it's great. So I asked my brother, I said, what do you think? Is this something that you think I could do? And he goes, oh, definitely. So, I applied, and ultimately, after a little bit of a struggle, they hired me, and things went great. And I was at Entercom, now Odyssey, from 2006 to 2018. And then after that, I went to work with Buddy for a while.
At WEC.
At WEC.
Yeah.
And I was part of the initial group of people that helped kind of launch that station when it made the conversion from, like the 40s and 50s to, more 60s stuff. Once I got there, COVID again, it was a killer.
Yeah.
Not for the radio station,
right,
but for me personally. Right. I had my whole year set up. All my clients provided services, none of which they could do during COVID.
Right.
And I didn't want to start from scratch.
Well, if you have to look back, who would you say are the people that influenced your music career the most?
In what?
Starting from the beginning.
Music people?
Music people.
Well, obviously the big one would be the Beatles, and anybody that was affiliated with the British invasion. That would be number one. Glenn Campbell kind of threw more kerosene on a good fire.
How about people in school? Anybody from Kenton?
When the Beatles hit, there were neighborhood bands all over the place. Right. And there were some survivors by the time I hit high school. Right. The Tweeds being one, with Dave Constantino.
And Paul Varga. Yeah.
Paul Varga, who went to West.
Yeah.
But that qualifies music of Kenton.
Yes.
Paul went to West.
Yeah, yeah.
Dave was with me, Bruce Piccato, Ted Reinhardt, Stuart Ziff, who went on to play with War, Jim Flynn. We were all in high school a year apart. So, like, I used to kid the guys from West. I'd say, well, you guys beat us in sports, but we kicked your butts in music. And we did.
Thanks, Dick, for coming out. And hopefully people will see this on the KentonHistory.org website. And good luck with your future. It seems like you're not done yet.
Well, still, not doing as much writing these days, but I probably enjoy performing more than I ever have. We've all lost people that were big influences on us. So every time I take the stage, I kind of take a little spiritual moment and I kind of thank them, and the fact that I can still do this, and I couldn't do it without them as I was maturing, and I always think of them every time I take the stage.